Imagine the world on the brink of nuclear war. 13 tense days held humanity's fate. This is the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the man who, unknowingly, saved us all. October 27, 1962 was one of the most important yet little-known dates in history. On this day, the world came closer than ever before to full-out nuclear war. If events had gone differently or one man had made an alternate decision, human civilization may have been annihilated. The stage was set years earlier. Between 1953 and 1959, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara orchestrated a military and political effort to overthrow the government of Cuba and ally the country with the Soviet Union. Having a communist nation just 90 miles from Florida was unacceptable to the United States. The American government made multiple failed attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro or overthrow his communist government in Cuba. One was the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, where American-backed Cuban exiles called the Brigade 2506 aimed to remove Castro, but received only half-hearted support. It ended quickly in defeat. The failed invasion proved to Castro that the US may invade fully, so he strengthened Cuba's ties with the Soviet Union for protection and solidified the nation as communist aligned with the Eastern Bloc. By 1962, both superpowers felt threatened by the other's nuclear capabilities. The Soviets were concerned by American PGM-19 Jupiter nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey, now within striking distance of Russia. Furthermore, the US far outnumbered the Soviets in nuclear weapons and delivery systems. Seeking parity, the Soviets covertly started placing nuclear missiles in Cuba in September 1962. Their goal was to counter the US threat, just as America had pressured the USSR by placing missiles in Italy and Turkey previously in 1961. However, they were unsure how the Americans would react to missiles being so close to home. On October 14th, US spy planes discovered the Soviet installations. President Kennedy was informed 2 days later. His advisors urged a military invasion of Cuba, but Kennedy alone disagreed, aware of a catastrophe if either side miscalculated. Meanwhile, Castro pressed the Soviets to launch a preemptive nuclear strike against the US. On October 22nd, with tensions at breaking point, Kennedy authorized a naval blockade around Cuba to intercept any further weapon shipments. Rather than resorting to immediate military action, Kennedy sought to contain the situation by isolating Cuba and preventing further Soviet reinforcements. Khrushchev announced that Soviet ships would ignore this US blockade of Cuba. For the first time, the US raised its nuclear alert status to DEFCON 2, just one step away from declaring all-out nuclear war. American nuclear bombers began continuously patrolling the skies around the clock, ready to drop atomic bombs on the Soviet Union within 15 minutes of an order. On October 25th, Soviet ships began challenging the US blockade, with some managing to slip past. The next day, as the US made plans to invade Cuba, Castro urged the Soviets in a telegram to launch a preemptive nuclear strike against America. With tensions higher than ever, all eyes turned to October 27th, which would determine the fate of the world. A Soviet submarine fleet had secretly passed the blockade into Cuban waters days prior. On the 27th, a B-59 sub was detected by American forces. US destroyers and an aircraft carrier pursued the sub underwater. One destroyer dropped practice depth charges, signaling for it to surface. However, the isolated Soviet crew mistook them for real bombs and thought war may have already started above. This B-59 was armed with a 5-kiloton nuclear torpedo. If the Americans were attacking, the crew reasoned it wouldn't matter if they fired back in self-defense. 3 officers had to agree to deploy the nuclear weapon, but while 2 were in favor, the third, Vasili Arkhipov, disagreed. By chance, Archipov's presence as the flotilla commander meant his approval was also required. Under intense pressure, he alone held firm against nuclear escalation. Eventually, the sub had to surface for air, but had Arkhipov made a different choice that day, the 5-kiloton torpedo could have destroyed the US squadron, killing thousands and leading to an all-out nuclear exchange that likely would have ended civilization as we know it. So the world owes its existence to one man's cool-headed dissent in the face of catastrophe, Vasili Arkhipov, who unknowingly saved us all from a potential doomsday. A nuclear war in 1962 would have likely killed a third of humanity, with most or all of those deaths concentrated in the US, the USSR, Europe, and China. October 28th, Khrushchev announced an order to dismantle the weapons. Just a few days later, the Soviet Union withdrew its missiles from Cuba between the 5th and 9th of November in exchange for a US public commitment not to invade Cuba and a secret pledge to withdraw missiles from Italy and Turkey. As a result of the crisis, a direct phone line was established between the White House and the Kremlin to facilitate immediate communication and prevent future misunderstandings. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history, friends. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to Searching History for more, and comment down below. Until next time, keep digging, keep exploring, and keep searching.